Welcome to San Diego Integral, March 9th, 2024. Our topic this month, Spiritual Intelligence, presented by Cindy Wigglesworth. Welcome to San Diego Integral. I'm Jerry Golick. I'm a member of San Diego Integral's leadership team. We have an exciting presentation today. Our speaker today is Cindy Wigglesworth, and she'll be guiding us on an exploration of spiritual intelligence. And we'll begin shortly, but first I want to mention that we'll be recording the meeting. So if you'd prefer not to be seen on video, you can just turn off your camera, although we do like to see your faces. And please note that the recording is of the speaker view. So if you're in the gallery, you won't be recorded unless you make a comment or ask a question. And also don't have to worry about the breakouts because we never record the breakout sessions. The link to the recording will be posted on Meetup, and then it will be on our YouTube channel. So San Diego Integral has a YouTube channel, and you can catch this video in just a couple of days. We'll get it posted as soon as we do some light editing. And all of our previous meetings are also posted up on the YouTube channel. You can find more information about San Diego Integral at our at sandiegointegral.org at our website. And we're also on Meetup and Facebook, and you can find links to those on sandiegointegral.org. And it's great to join either the Facebook or Meetup group because that way you'll be notified when we have new events. If you ever do have questions or comments about these meetings, you're welcome to contact one of our leadership team through Meetup or Facebook. Next month's meeting will be on April 13th. Our speaker is going to be Mark Fischler, and he's going to be talking about integral constitutional interpretation. And he did a presentation at the WTF conference last year. It was very interesting to me. So I think you'll find that fascinating. And then on May 11th, we have Pema Dragpa, the author of the newly released Integral Buddhism book. And so he'll be our speaker in May. And also, I'd like to encourage everyone to check out the ICON conference. That's the Integral Conference of North America, which is coming up May 16th through the 19th in Denver. And you can get more information on that at weareicon.org. And Tom, did you want to say anything else about ICON while we're on the subject?
It's going to be a great conference. Cindy's going to be a keynote speaker, as is Mark Fischler next month, presenting at San Diego Integral. And if you haven't seen Chris Baish's presentation at SDI, it's really worth the YouTube video. But it is weareicon.org, not com. Thank you, Jerry.
Great. Thanks, Tom. And finally, we would like to invite you to make a small donation for today if you'd like to do that. Donations help us to cover the meetup fees, the web hosting, and other expenses. And you can make a donation at sandiegointegral.org. Okay, so at this point, we're ready to get started with our guest speaker today. And so I'm going to turn the meeting over to Tom to introduce Cindy.
Thank you, Jerry. It's my pleasure to introduce Cindy Wigglesworth. Cindy worked in the oil industry and human resources for 20 years before leaving to create SQ21 Self-Assessment and to write her best-selling book, SQ21, The 21 Skills of Spiritual Intelligence. She's a longtime integralist who also credits Daniel Goleman's emotional intelligence writings as significant influences in her own work. Cindy is the president of Deep Change, Inc., with the goal to assist individuals and corporations to develop the 4 key intelligences. They are IQ, intellectual quotient, EQ, emotional intelligence, SQ, spiritual quotient or intelligence, and PQ, physical intelligence. Her training of people, the approach spans the ability to be both faith-friendly and faith-neutral. I love that phrase, faith-friendly and faith-neutral. The latter necessary for people like me who still have an allergic reaction to proselytizing. In doing so, SQ21 offers a way for atheists, people of faith, and those who are spiritual but not religious to understand each other and open a dialectic into the ever-present universal concerns. Nobody escapes. The goal of her training is to shift away from self-focused ego to behaving from a loving and peaceful higher self. She calls leaders that achieve this conscious capitalists. Cindy's work fills in some of the gaps, especially the assessment of spiritual intelligence that exists within integral theory. She has written how our tendency to value states so highly leads us to under-focusing on the development of skills which are critical to the development of the future human. Cindy will be a keynote speaker at the Future Human Icon Conference in Denver. Please give Cindy a warm San Diego palm tree blowing welcome.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you for that fabulous introduction. Hi, everybody. It's wonderful to be here. Thanks for inviting me. All right, I'm going to share a PowerPoint deck. And just so that you guys know, I'm happy to share this as a PDF later if people want it. Some of the slides I'll be going through pretty quickly, so don't feel overwhelmed. If you want to get the PDF later so you can look at it more closely, you'll have the chance to do that. All right. Hopefully you can see this. All right. So we're talking about spiritual intelligence in a context of a group of people who are integralists and know a little bit about integral and spiral dynamics and second tier. And in the context of ICON, where we'll be talking about the future human. So I'm going to kind of keep the context around what does it mean to use spiritual intelligence as a way to help you get to second tier, which I'm assuming is part of being the future state of the desirable future human. I'm going to briefly talk about the four intelligences. They're not just for leaders, they're really for any of us. How EQ and SQ are related to each other. Then I'll get into what is SQ21, connect this as I talk through it with integral theory. And after our first breakout, we'll come back and talk about how my research on SQ21 shows a strong cross-correlation to higher stages of development. So that'll be after the first breakout session. And let me set my timer so I can kind of keep track of where I am. All right, so you've heard a little bit of my background, so I'm going to jump over that. For those who might not have as much depth in the world of integral, I'll just remind you there's kind of like 5 things you got to know to understand the world from Ken Wilber's perspective. And that is stages of development. And you may know of stages through specific theories like spiral dynamics or Lovinger's work, which has been extended by people like Suzanne Cook-Reuter, Keegan's work, and other developmentalists. Lines of development or lines of intelligence, which include spiritual intelligence, states of consciousness, which include spiritual states, as well as waking, dreaming, and deep sleep, the 4 quadrants of experience, and the types of personality. My work will most clearly today show its connection to the first 3, but there is, of course, a connection to all 5. All right, let's go to the next one. So what is an intelligence? I think it's important, and it's one of the things I love about Wilber's work, is to define your terms. So what is an intelligence? In the world of psychology, there is a specific set of definitions that help you understand what is an intelligence. It boils down to these 2 bullet points. It's an innate potential that is brought into form through practice, and it is an adeptness or appropriately reasoned behavior or choice that comes from having developed this intelligence. What does that mean? You look at this little girl sitting at the piano, and she is practicing piano and reading music. Now, she may have been born musically gifted, but if she does not bring that potential into form through practice, she will not develop musical intelligence. A lot of times people will say to me, but Cindy, we're all born spiritual. And I would agree with that. We are born as innately spiritual beings, but we are not born spiritually intelligent. And I think that's a really important distinction, because you have to build these skills over time through effort, through practice. And if you do that, you get something good. You get a behavior, some capabilities that will serve you. And that's why you go through the effort to do it. Now, as you think about the 4 intelligences, I like to introduce this topic to people as having a couple of different ways to look at it, both of which are useful. The first is to think of the lines of intelligence as being somewhat independent. So IQ develops somewhat separately from EQ, which develops somewhat separately from spiritual intelligence and physical intelligence. And you could see this in the vertical bars. You might be highly developed on IQ and developed or underdeveloped on EQ. And most people, when I do a longer version of this workshop, I'll say, have you ever known anybody in your life who was really, really smart and had lousy interpersonal skills? And everybody laughs and goes, yeah, you know, that's my boss, that's my brother, that's my spouse, that's me. You know, I have been that person, you know, so it is a natural kind of developmental process for some of us to go through overdeveloping IQ before we really develop EQ. And that was true for me. So it's partially true that these are independent, but it's also partially true that these intelligences are interconnected and somewhat interdependent. So here you see a developmental journey from the bottom to the top, where if you think about newborn babies, they have so much to develop in terms of learning to focus their eyes and rolling over and crawling and walking and running. There's so much to master about their body. So the earliest years of childhood have a tremendous emphasis on PQ. Not to say that they're not also developing IQ. Of course they are. But the heaviest development preschool tends to be PQ, learning to master your body, and then you get to school and there's a huge emphasis on IQ, learning to read, write, do mathematics, all that stuff. EQ is coming online the whole time, but the ability of our brain to do full emotional intelligence skills is really not, we're not fully capable till about age 22 to 25. And so you go through middle school and you're just being tormented by all these confusing relationships. And then you get into romantic relationships and you're being confused by that. And you go to work and you've got to figure out how to manage in a team, work in a team environment. Emotional intelligence is increasingly important as we go through our lives, and our brain comes to support that. And if we work to develop EQ, it can be very supportive of our overall success. EQ and SQ are tightly connected, and I'm going to hope to show you how that is. You need a little bit of EQ to start doing your SQ work. And then as you develop SQ, it amplifies the EQ, and the EQ amplifies the SQ, and they form a virtuous reinforcing cycle of growth and development. So the relationship of the 4 intelligences is not simple, but with these 2 graphics, you can get the gist of it pretty quickly. All right, let me move on. Physical intelligence, what is it? It's things like making sure you get good sleep, good exercise, you're taking care of your body. It's also for children learning how to master their body, roll over, crawl, walk, run, tie their shoes, do simple things that seem simple to us, but we're not simple as kids. As you get older, physical intelligence comes back into your reality again as something you cannot take for granted. You've got to put more effort as you age to be sure you're taking care of the things that your body needs to sustain your IQ, sustain your EQ. If you're sleep deprived, if you're unhealthy, it makes all the other intelligences harder. And so PQ remains kind of foundational in that pyramid throughout life. IQ, we probably know the most about. I realize it has some controversial history, which is worth discussing in another setting, but today we're focusing on SQ. We'll just think about it today as the cognitive line of development. I'm not going to get into the unfortunate history of some IQ assessments and what they were used for, but there is an intelligence cognitive line of development, and it's important. Sometimes people misstate this and say it's not IQ, it's EQ that makes you successful, which is actually not true. What the research shows is you need a minimum amount of IQ or cognitive capability to enter a field. And once you're in the door, once you've successfully competed to get in the door, EQ becomes the differentiator, but IQ always remains important. I've mentioned that EQ and SQ interact, so I'll skip over this slide. And I'm going to talk very briefly about EQ and what it is composed of. So this was the model that I got introduced to when I first became aware of EQ. I totally fell in love with this model, and it became the mental model that I built SQ on top of. This is the Daniel Goleman, Richard Boyatzis model, and it's of different 4 quadrants than Ken's. This is not Ken Wilber's 4 quadrants. This is on the left is the self, on the right-hand side are others. On the upper 2 quadrants is awareness, and the lower 2 quadrants are actions. You start with self-awareness and then pick up social awareness and self-management skills in order to get to the outcome quadrant on the lower right, which is good social skills or good relationship skills, which leads to positive impacts on other people. The specific skills that were in these boxes at the time I got certified, and these have changed. They were different before I got certified, and they've changed again since I got certified. But these were the skills that were in those boxes back then. The 3 bolded in yellow remain crucial and are present in all the literature around emotional intelligence. To develop emotional competence, you have to have emotional self-awareness, be able to name your emotion, and to understand what triggered it. This was also a crucial skill for spiritual intelligence. Self-awareness and self-mastery come from, in the spiritual level, come from also having it at the emotional level. So can you name your emotions, and do you understand what's triggering them, is the first upper left skill that you have to have. Empathy is the first skill in the upper right, which means I can understand your feelings. I can appropriately sense, either by mirror neurons, kind of intuiting it into my body, what you're feeling, or I can read your body cues and hear your tone of voice and cognitively map that those signal that you're angry. All right, so either I'm getting it directly or I'm getting it through analysis, but either through cognitive or empathic input, I am feeling or understanding your emotions. Emotional self-management means I know I'm angry, and when I'm angry, I tend to do this. And so I interrupt that, and I have a more choiceful, powerful response because I'm not on autopilot. That leads to all the things in the lower right quadrant, all these social skills that you see here, like being an inspirational leader, being able to influence others, being a good change catalyst, handling conflict well, and so on. So this just rocked my world when I saw it. I was like, gosh, I wish somebody had given me this when I was in my 20s. It would have made my life so much easier instead of me having to fumble my way through figuring it out. So here we are on time, thank goodness, and moving to spiritual intelligence. I told you this would be fast. So when I introduce spiritual intelligence to groups, and we won't do this exercise, I'll just describe it for you, although you're welcome to make comments in the chat. I ask people first to tell me what they admire in spiritual leaders before I tell them what I think spiritual intelligence is. I'm actually having them tell me what they think it is. And here's how I get them to tell me that, is I have them list the names of people that they admire, and the word admire is crucial, who they consider to be spiritual leaders. So if there are team tables, they can do this with a scribe, and they list out all these names, and it's anybody can put a name on the list. So name the people that you admire who you consider to be spiritual leaders. They could be fictional, it could be Yoda, but whoever it is, list those people. Then the second question, which is really the more powerful question, is to think through, okay, why do I admire these people? What are the character traits that cause me to admire these people? And if you're at a team table, somebody scribes, you write them all down. And then we report it up to the front of the room, and then we have a conversation about it. And we say, are any of these character traits things you would not want to see in your organization? And generally people will look at that list and go, no, I want all of that. So what kind of lists come back? This is the typical list that I would get, and it varies by culture as I go around the world, but you will get whatever the religious figures are based on the culture and religion of the people that I'm with. That could be Jesus, Buddha, Muhammad, Moses, Abraham, various saints. political leaders and agents of change that are also sometimes spiritual leaders, like Gandhi, Nelson Mandela, Martin Luther King Jr., Thich Nhat Hanh, etc. Relatives usually come up, teachers, authors that people admire, and coworkers, nurses will often list my patients are spiritual leaders to me because of what the grace that they exhibit going through what they're going through. And I've had a dozen or so bosses get listed, which just goes to show it is possible for a boss to be a spiritual leader, which is wonderful. Next, what are the character traits? And this is a simplified list, but this is a very representative list of the themes that recur and recur and recur. These people are loving and compassionate. They are humble, wise, courageous, faithful, forgiving, accepting, calm and centered in spite of craziness, have honesty or integrity or authenticity, various synonyms for that, are peaceful or nonviolent, wonderful teachers, able to inspire other people, great leaders, persistent in the face of difficulties, seeing the gift inside of other people and helping them develop. So this is the list. When I say, okay, we come up with this list, is there anything on this list you don't want in your organization? People usually go, I want all of that. Are there any of these characteristics that you wouldn't want for yourself? Or are there some on here that you would want for yourself? Which of these might you want? And you can reflect on that. So what happens through this process is people have discovered that they already know what spiritual intelligence is. I don't have to tell them. They know it's this. And it's more than emotional intelligence. It is something beyond good interpersonal skills. There's something next level about all of this. So then I quickly go into a discussion of definitions, because definitions can quickly get us into trouble if we don't deal with them. The elephant in the room is usually the word religion. So I quickly define, what do I mean by spirituality? What do I mean by religion? What do I mean by spiritual intelligence? The word spirituality I have chosen to define as an innate human need to be connected to something larger than ourselves, something that we consider to be sacred or noble, or you might prefer the word divine. We use synonyms very generously in this work. And so, if you prefer one of those terms, you use the term you prefer. The innate human need comes from Abraham Maslow. And so if you know Maslow's work, especially his final book on the farther reaches of human nature, it really showed that he felt beyond the self-actualizing level was another level of human development that really showed this connection to a higher self, much less ego, commitment to a service, and being connected to something larger than ourselves. So spirituality is available to all of us. Religion, on the other hand, is if you're using Ken Wilber's quadrants, lower right-hand Ken Wilber quadrant, a system or a structure that has been created by human beings to help us meet our spiritual needs. It may be divinely inspired, but it is an organization of sacred texts, rituals, buildings, teachers, priests, whatever, that organize and try to develop humans and their spiritual intelligence. We can talk about the ways in which people have been abused by religion, and it's undoubtedly happened and continues to happen. But religion has also served some positive functions. It's not always toxic. It's not always healthy. It's a complicated combination. But spirituality is an innate human need, the big word, everybody has that. Religion is the narrow word. It's a man-made structure. So what is spiritual intelligence? When I tried to define spiritual intelligence, my first thought was spiritual intelligence is the ability to love with biggest sense of love that I could think of. I thought of all those spiritual leaders and like how amazing they were and what set them apart. But the word love is complicated in English. It's hard to define. If you look up definitions, you end up with some Greek or Latin words or many, many hundreds of pages of people trying to define types of love. I wanted something simple, something elegant, something easy to remember. And I finally found this parable from the Eastern traditions. And it says, love is a bird with two wings. One wing is wisdom. The other wing is compassion. If either wing is broken, the bird cannot fly. And it still gives me goosebumps when I say that. It just has this deep feeling of truth to me. And I thought that is so beautiful. Wisdom is the best of the mind or head, compassion, the best of the heart. They need to come together in the center. and then the bird can fly. If either one is missing, love is not effective. You can have compassion without wisdom and do harm. You can have wisdom or head knowledge without heart and do harm. So to really be a loving force in the world is to bring both of these pieces together. So I seem to have skipped over a slide. Where did that go? Come back. There it is. So spiritual intelligence is the ability to behave with wisdom and compassion or love while maintaining inner and outer peace, regardless of the situation. Now, the word behave is critical. It's very much easier to love people in the abstract when they're not around, when you're meditating in the woods or whatever. It is very much harder to do it when you're dealing with people in the everyday world of grocery checkout lanes and traffic and all the other ways in which we have to deal with each other. So behaving with love while maintaining inner and outer peace, regardless of the situation. Inner peace makes outer peace sustainable. Outer peace you can do by force of will, and that is better than being unpeaceful, but it is exhausting. And so finding the ability to unseat the stories of the ego so that we can release the triggers of those emotions that we became aware of during our emotional intelligence development means if you don't get angry, you're not having to suppress the anger. So getting after the roots of thoughts and interpretations that create the anger is a very powerful way to develop SQ. And the regardless of the situation is the saintly level of this thing. The simplest way to describe what SQ is learning to shift from ego self to higher self. A more nuanced explanation is the ego needs to also grow up. The ego grows up and becomes an effective partner to the higher self. I'm going to skip that slide. This is just some fun little pictures. What is it like to have an immature ego? It's to be completely self-obsessed with this guy combing his one hair, or to be blaming everybody else for how it's never my fault, it's your fault, pointing outward at other people. Many synonyms are possible for the ego self. And again, we welcome synonyms. Higher self, I just love these pictures. The woman on the left has just this most wonderful smile, and it looks to me like she has no teeth, but she's smiling and doesn't care. It's not about mirror and self-obsession and how pretty do I look. She's just feels present to me. And same with the guy on the right-hand side. I may be projecting, but that's what I see. There are many synonyms for higher self. Again, we try to be very generous with use of synonyms. You might prefer soul, spirit, Atman, Christ consciousness, Buddha nature, divine nature, non-dual self, witnessing self, authentic self, and so on. And this is where the faith neutral and faith friendly comes in, so that people who have faith and might prefer to say soul or Christ consciousness or Buddha nature, fine. And people who really prefer more of a psychological language, like my authentic self or my witnessing self, fine. Use the words that work for you. Our goal is to become a good partnership between the ego and the higher self. The higher self, I would envision, my way of thinking of it, is driving the car, but the ego is an essential navigator, because the higher self kind of hangs out in the non-dual realm a lot and doesn't really understand other egos that it's bumping into. So a mature partner in the ego helps navigate through other egos. And together, I am whole and present and able to present love to the world. Backing up for a second. There are 21 skills in 4 quadrants that I have described as being part of spiritual intelligence. We don't have time to go through these, but I will give you the gist of it. These 4 quadrants stack on top of the 4 quadrants of emotional intelligence, so they are stepped straight up. So instead of self-awareness that's emotional self-awareness, here we have ego self, higher self-awareness in the upper left quadrant. Instead of social awareness in the upper right quadrant, we have universal awareness. Instead of self-management in the lower left, we have higher self, ego self-mastery. And instead of social skills in the lower right, we have social mastery and spiritual presence. And you can see there's 21 skills and they include a lot of things. I'm going to just show you a few of them here. So the outcome quadrant is these 17 through 21, being a wise and effective mentor, being a wise and effective leader, making compassionate and wise decisions, being a calming and healing presence in the world, and being aligned with the ebb and flow of life. I'm going to skip these because don't have enough time. Come back to them later if we need to. Here's an example, skill 4, one that is particularly highly correlated with stages of adult development. This is called complexity of inner thought. It's not about IQ, it's something slightly different. And here are the levels. The way this system works, each skill is described from level 1, which is novice, to level 5, which is expert, or the highest level I know how to describe. It's derived from thinking about those spiritual exemplars that I described at the beginning. And you can see that they are described in some detail here. And then there's a survey that goes with this, an assessment that goes with this, where there are questions that relate to every one of these levels. So at level 1, which is the novice, I understand that rules are guidelines, and sometimes a higher principle requires that I break the rules. I understand that decisions involving multiple people are complex. So you can see this is already a step beyond rigid adherence to the rules, which would be more characteristic of blue on the spiral. At level 2, I consider multiple points of view when I make decisions. Knowing what is right and wrong is not a simple matter. For example, biomedical ethics cases. Level 3, I understand there are no guaranteed outcomes for decisions I have to make. I can make decisions in the face of insufficient information. I can see that 2 apparently conflicting points of view can both contain elements of truth. And level 5, which is the highest we describe in this skill, I enjoy thinking about complex and even conflicting ideas. I can embrace paradox and mystery. All right. I'm not going to go through these in the same level of detail because of time, but skill 5 is a really crucial skill. It's the awareness of ego self and higher self. And here you go from having a basic understanding that I even have an ego to working your way to level 5, where the voice of higher self is now the principal voice I hear, and ego is in joyful service to my higher self. And another crucial skill, skill 7, awareness of other people's worldviews, going from I even listen to differing points of view, which we don't do much these days. Level 1, I even listen to differing points of view, to level 5, I can see through the perspective of others, even those who act to harm me. So you see, this is a step up from EQ stuff. This is more like the spiritual leaders that were listed on that earlier page. All right, so we've reached the point for our first breakout. I think I'm kind of on time here. And let me check the chat. I've got a question. David, what do I say to people like Brian Greene of Columbia who deny spirituality to begin with? I think I'd have to look at Brian's argument and see how he's defining spirituality. A lot of times it's in the definition of the terms, so I can't really answer your question without first trying to understand Brian's perspective. Once I understood his perspective, then I could speak to it perhaps more effectively. We might have an area of agreement once we agreed on limitations of words and what they might mean, but I don't know. And I don't have to convince every single person. I believe the recording is available after the workshop tonight through San Diego Integral. Yes, I see Tom is nodding. And the PDF of this slide deck will be available if San Diego Integral wants to make that available. All right. So these are the questions I'd like you guys to go into maybe a 10 to 15 minute breakout to discuss, which is, as we think about the future and what kind of people we need to be to thrive in the future, it's sort of 2 aspects, and deal with it as you choose to in your group. What are we missing, or what are humans doing wrong now that's not likely to make us thrive in the future? And what skills or characteristics do you think we need in a future human to thrive? So you can tackle just the second one if you want. What characteristics do we need to thrive in the future? But if you also want to mention some of the ways in which we're screwed up, that's okay too. And this will actually help me as I'm prepping for Denver's conference. As I hear your input, I have my own thoughts, but I welcome yours. So whoever, I will stop the share. I think you guys can maybe either screenshot this. I'll leave this up for a minute. If you have your cell phone handy, you can take a photo of this slide. You can screenshot this. And I believe it will also be posted to the breakout room, but it only posts for like 10 or 20 seconds before it disappears. So if you think you want to have it, take your cell phone out and take a phone snapshot of this so you have this question. I will turn it back to San Diego Integral. You guys want to handle this now?
Yeah, we've got the breakout rooms ready, and sounds like everybody's got their questions. There are going to be 4 people per room for about 15 minutes, and we'll see you with your smiling faces back at the end of that. See you later.
Breakout sessions are not recorded. Okay, welcome back, everyone. I think everyone is back from the breakouts, so Cindy, you can proceed whenever you're ready.
We're going to take the next, 7 to 10 minutes to hear just a few highlights from each group. So would, someone from each group just give me a few highlights of what you guys discussed in terms of what's messed up, what are we missing, what do we need?
Okay, I can start. What we need is inner peace, community, and valuing differences. And what is wrong is there's too much competition, addiction to adrenaline, focus on goals instead of the process. We don't listen to our own bodies and our own wisdom. We don't really listen to other people. Too much stress and fear, and we lack openness.
Other than that, we're great.
I know, yeah.
All right, next group.
Okay, we tended to see, the general consensus about what's wrong is just, well, here we are. This is an evolutionary process, and we are where we are. And as to what we want for the future human to thrive, it was a general. It was three women, and we all went in for the more embodied spirituality, balancing the head as well as the heart as well as the head, the right brain as well as the left brain, caregiving, as well as the performing and producing, rebalancing the yin and the yang.
Nice.
Is my summation.
Nice. And it was caregiving, and what was the other?
Oh gosh, what were let's see, head and heart, right brain, left brain, embodied spirituality. We mentioned the traditional indigenous forms of spirituality that are embodied, valuing. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Next
So
group.
we were focusing on a work environment for the future human.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that Jerry said we need is strong enough leadership so that these types of values don't get put down or poo-pooed along the way.
Mm-hmm.
And then I made the comment of there seems to be less emphasis with junk and stuff, and people want purpose and meaning in their work. So it feels like we're already beginning to move in that direction, where the prototypes of spiritual needs are already emerging in the work environment.
Nice.
We were talking about how much we liked your emphasis on the idea that there were skills involved,
Mm-hmm.
and that you can learn how to become more of a spiritually developed human being, and how those skills are applicable as an individual, and that you develop those individually, but they have to also be developed in community, and how important looking at those two, looking at especially how you incorporate those skills towards wisdom and compassion that you've worked on as an individual in a communal setting, that's part of the learning that's so important.
Nice. Thumbs up I see on the screen. All right. And is there another group to go?
Yeah, I could report out from our group in terms of our story. So, well, my dog's bark in the back. Our story was we started answering the question, me and Larry CA and Larry Denver. And then Eric was bringing forward the issue of separation kind of being at the core of a lot of the lack of the emergence of the future human, and kind of invited us, how could we be less separate right now with the four of us? And then Larry CA started riffing on that. And we wondered if from the we, I would say, the question emerged that maybe the questions themselves engendered more of a cognitive separation than an embodiment of the future human qualities. So maybe like a breakout question could be, how could you embody the future human qualities you want to see in the world with your group right now? Something like that. And then I think I'm now seeing almost a collective voice emerging. We're invited by ourselves to be that presence right now in our group as a intentionality slash daring, because the vulnerability is a big piece of the emergence of these future human qualities.
Very, very cool. Separation is the core story. I like that. Finding our way past it. Is there another group to go? All right, and move on. I'm going to get a few more slides to go through, and then we'll have another breakout. So this next section, I'm going to share a piece of research about looking at stages of adult development using Suzanne Cook-Greuter's model, the Sentence Completion Test Integral, SCTI, the Sentence Completion Test Integral, and the Maturity Assessment Profile, which came from the interpretation of the SCTIs. So what we did, Suzanne and I agreed to, is that when she would offer people, they would come to her to take the SCTI, they would be offered a free SQ21 in return for participating in this research. So they took her assessment and they took mine, and we had 139 people in that data set. Now, to look at her model, which is on the left, it's very similar, although these people use slightly different terms and they change their terms. So the term they use, they might change it 10 years later or 5 years later, so it keeps it confusing. But essentially, you've got Torbert, Cook-Greuter, Joyner, and Josephs using similar kinds of SCTI tests, not exactly the same, but similar, and a similar basic model. You have pre-conventional stages, conventional stages, and post-conventional stages. The conventional stages are the diplomat, which would be in spiral dynamics language, early blue, the expert, which is late blue plus early orange, really. It's a straddling of blue and orange, and the achiever, which is peak orange. And then the post-conventional stages, which she might call the individualist or the catalyst. I think Torbert maybe used the term catalyst. The strategist, which is approximately yellow. So you got the individualist, who's roughly green, the strategist, who's roughly yellow, the alchemist or magician or synergist, which is turquoise, and then the ironist, which is late turquoise, maybe coral. We don't have enough data to really say on that. The single asterisk is my interpretation that says to get to green, you have to at least have some EQ. You can be peak achiever with very little EQ, but it's hard to get all the way to peak orange and then transition into green without any development of your emotional intelligence skills. And I believe, and my hypothesis going in was that second tier would require spiritual intelligence. So let me show you what the results look like. I'll walk you through this chart just briefly. So if you look on the left-hand side, the scale goes from 0 to 100. There are 21 skills in my model. Each of them can be scored as high as 5. So this could have gone from 0 to 105, which would have been the maximum possible score. Nobody scored that, so we cut it off at 100 just for the sake of the chart. But in theory, the maximum score is 105 on my assessment. Going across the bottom on Suzanne's assessment, you see the stages that people were primarily centered at. Okay, so people have a range, you know, all of us are expressing multiple stages inside of ourselves, but we have kind of a center of gravity. And so some people's center of gravity was diplomat, which is the early blue. Some were expert, which is late blue, early orange. Some were achiever, which is peak orange. Some were individualist, which is green. Strategist, early yellow. Magician, late yellow, early turquoise. Ironist, turquoise to maybe coral. Now you see going the purple line, going from left to right, the purple line is connecting the little red boxes. The little red boxes are the averages within each of those developmental stages. The average clearly goes up from left to right. The next thing to look at is the range. So you see the diplomat has a range of about 29 up to the low 60s. The expert has a range of about 27 up to the low 80s. The achiever goes from just above 20 to the high 80s, which is the biggest range of any of these ranges. Now, I found this kind of interesting, but people would say, well, you know, gee, I wouldn't have thought an achiever would be able to develop that much spiritual intelligence. That was interesting. And would you rather work with an achiever who's got spiritual intelligence or an achiever that doesn't? And obviously, I would prefer to work with an achiever that has spiritual intelligence. So that's actually kind of a hopeful finding. As you go to the right, you notice the minimums then start jumping up. So the lowest score of an individualist is now almost 40. The lowest score of a strategist is in the high 40s. The lowest score of a magician, and this is yellow, is about 54. And then the lowest score of the ironist, now that's a very small population, but is about 80. So what this tells me is that as you move into second tier, spiritual intelligence is a necessary but not sufficient condition to help you get there. So you can have a lot of spiritual intelligence and still be an expert or an achiever. But if you don't have enough spiritual intelligence, it's going to be very hard to get to second tier. So a necessary but not sufficient condition to get you to second tier. So my conclusions, let me open up the chat. Somebody's posted something into the chat. See if I'm missing anything important. Okay. Higher stages, I believe, are crucial to respond to the life conditions we face. We are facing so much complexity that I think without the higher stages of development, it's going to be really hard for us to navigate. Claire Graves talked about the first 6 stages up through green, tier 1, as it will hit a log jam. Tier 1 would hit a log jam, and the log jam would be the impetus that propelled us into second tier. That the leap from green to yellow was a huge transition, and that transition would only come with a lot of stress. Guess what? We're under a lot of stress. So in a way, congratulations, we are creating the life conditions that may help us get to the place we want to get to. So the belief is that higher stages will be crucial to respond to the life conditions on the planet. I have found that SQ, higher scores, are highly correlated with higher stages. I believe we need all 4 intelligences to move to these higher stages, and that SQ is a crucial skill set for world leaders and evolved voters and citizens to develop. So let me see. I don't think we need to talk about that. I'm not sure we need to talk about that. I think we're kind of at a good place to, let me check my notes here. Yeah. Here's my sort of humorous way of thinking about what does it take to be spiritually intelligent. And this baby is willing to look at the world upside down. Are you willing to turn your worldview upside down and reconsider everything you know and develop a characteristic of humble curiosity, deep, profound openness to the world, to think about and understand what's happening, what's going on, and what might the solutions be going forward? So for our second breakout, let's see if we can go to the right, integral theory and SQ21, as we look about to the future, becoming who we want to be to thrive, and you think about integral theory, what tips and points and insights can Ken Wilber's work, can integral theory's work help us with? You know, what insights are useful there? And what strengths or insights do you think SQ21 or spiritual intelligence might be able to bring? So I would like to suggest we go into our second breakout. Again, take a snapshot of this if you need to with your camera. It can pop up in the little temporary chat that will appear in the breakout session. You can do a screenshot if you prefer. But what do you think we can learn from integral theory? What do you think we can learn from spiritual intelligence that can help guide us to the next step, to the future human, to a successful future? Any questions before we jump into the second breakout?
All right, here you go. Blast off.
Breakout sessions are not recorded.
Yanked out before I was ready.
Story
Welcome
of our
back,
lives.
everyone.
So sorry about that, everybody. You were yanked back before you were ready to be done. But we have between now and 8 is open conversation. So we're going to feed back from your groups, and then we are free to talk about 8 Central Time, 6 California time. So between now and 6 p.m. California time is conversation. Part 1 is tell me, please, what you talked about in your groups. I want to hear.
Okay, I'll jump in here because we rehearsed for this. I gave a general overview because I've been reading Ken Wilber for 40 years, and my sense of the strengths and insights that I get from Ken Wilber's Aqua model and his other work, to me they're a combination of a very accurate map of all of life, and it's like a map and a GPS system. I have navigated my life so much more successfully with far less upsets than I would have without it, because it's like I have an insight into the territory, and then once I kind of have a sense of where I am, where the other thing is, I have a sense of how to get where I want to go or how to handle situations. So to me, Aqua gives me the strength in dealing with situations and the insight. And then the spirit for this spiritual intelligence, what Cindy's bringing to this, I have a lot of admiration because Ken Wilber's flying at 30,000 feet and he's very difficult to read. And we need people like Cindy who translate this into comprehensible stuff for the rest of humanity. And specifically what Cindy's been doing with going into organizations, high-level executives who have to deal competently with very difficult situations. And what Cindy's doing is translating this into a toolkit. And Anna had a very specific set of terms for what Cindy's providing for people who have to work in the world of big business. So Anna, could you say you had a set of 4 or 5 terms?
Well, it all boiled down, dear Cindy, and I applaud you for making all of spiral dynamics and Fallon and integral and Ken Wilber more Robert Fulghum based, so that all we need to know to be able to use the skills and teach them and have a toolkit, we learned in kindergarten.
Yep. Everything I need to
So-
know, I learned in kindergarten. Clean up after
Exactly.
myself, you know.
So that's what I applauded you for, and what we were trying to look at the colors. And so now I'm going to pass the baton to Ian up in, is it Quebec or where in Canada? Ottawa.
So it
He's
was,
got an interesting question.
yeah, it is more of a question, just again, appreciating the model that you've developed, Cindy. Just wondering how that kind of lines up with, well, I know Terry O'Fallon's model better, but I know it's very close to Suzanne's, where she would say that to get into a higher level of development, there's a lived experience that you have to go through, and it's not just a cognitive understanding of a skill that's going to get you there. And so that's just the one question that we had.
Yeah, I would 100% echo and support that. If you are not doing the heavy lifting of engaging with other people who are annoying and difficult and occasionally incomprehensible, if you're not doing the difficult work of looking at your own stuff, which is occasionally or always annoying and difficult and incomprehensible, you're not doing the heavy lifting of building to spiritual intelligence. So I'm all for let's chop wood, carry water. We got to do the work. Peak experiences are often over focused on as like, you know, if you just have this non-dual awakening, you'll be there. But I think plenty of people have become good at non-dual experiencing and still had trouble functioning in the world. My bias is wanting to function in the world. I want to learn how to love God, love myself, and love my neighbor. Those are my goals. And God, I use that term in the biggest, most expansive way, not the exclusivist way, but spirit, cosmos. I want to love life with a capital L. I want to understand evolution. I want to be connected with that. And I want to learn to love and forgive myself. I'm often a horrible, nasty, mean self-critic. And I want to learn to love my neighbor. And to the degree I'm nasty and mean on the interior, I'm going to tend to be nasty and judgmental on the exterior as well. So I have found myself to be an endless font of exercises and things I need to work on. And I think applied spirituality is where it's at.
Okay, that makes sense. Thanks.
Mm-hmm. All right, fireworks. That's
Ooh.
cool. I didn't know you could do that. That's very fancy, Anna.
Everybody can do that. Bring in your we were talking about artificial intelligence, AI, generative AI. And because I asked Ian, you know, where he got all the colors from, and he said, well, that's Terry O'Fallon, that's Stages. And so I Googled it when we were just talking, and ta-da, guess who's helping me Google and find things? Generative AI. So watch out, everybody. You know, I'm all cold here in Minnesota, don't you know? But we've got warm AI helpers.
That's great. That's great. And be careful because AI hallucinates.
I know. Yes.
Yeah. It wants to please you, so it will find something even if it's wrong. Yeah. What else? Anybody? Next group? That was fun. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I'll jump in. Cindy, I agree with you that it, after 35 plus whatever years of dealing with integral and spirituality and mysticism and all the concepts, all the mental constructs, the importance of bringing it into practice, enacting the being as doing, or the doing as being, or both. And it's something, how do I say? And realizing that sometimes all these typing systems, even stage development, they're typing systems, be it Enneagram or Myers-Briggs or the DISC or the horoscope or whatever. They're typing systems generated ideally to be better able to connect with other people. And unfortunately, I've experienced over way too long that they end up getting used as a way to separate ourselves from other people. And to not really connect. And so therefore, in my last group, as Daniel was pointing out, the Tao Te Ching, super, super simple and integral. We see the complexities of the complexities and how to navigate and be in that in a way that it really comes back down to presence. How are we showing up right here, right now? Can we find that place that is love for one another? To be and enact that, it doesn't mean give up your wisdom about how to let that love show up. If somebody wants to kill me, it's going to show up differently than if somebody doesn't want to kill me.
Right.
But it all comes back to right here, right now. How can we handle the simplicity and the complexity and use all these typing systems as ways to deal better with ourselves on the inner, so that we can show up in ways that are healthy and strong and clear and beautiful and bright. Really.
Right. Right. Any of these distinctions that we draw, whether it's levels, stages of development, typologies, lines, quadrants, can be used to understand and integrate and bring us closer, or it can be used to separate and judge. So it's the endless human dilemma of, do we want to be separated? Do we want to not be separated? And I think there's sort of that tension of polarities. Yes, is I want to be an individual, I want to remain separate, and I want to be a collective. And finding a way to do that that's mature and healthy is going to be a challenge. It's going to be a fun challenge, hopefully. All right. Is there another group? I took notes for my group, so I can report out on mine. All right, I'll go ahead and report out on mine. What we can take from integral theory that would be useful is to remember the evolutionary impulse exists and is in service of the divine. There is a teleology, so to speak, in Ken's work. There is an implied positive, loving arrow of development to the universe. It's helpful to remember that. The integral theory helps bring a wholeness. A lot of what Ken wrote 40 years ago is coming back. We're in the 1960s kind of again at a different level. We can use integral theory to integrate and make healthy the levels and stages. We can transcend and include as long as we make each stage and piece healthy before we include it. And then we can transcend with inclusion. The SQ21 ties into sort of the divine calling of the universe, can help us with the extending and integrating. One person said there are limits to IQ and SQ, and so relying on limits to IQ and EQ, so relying on SQ is helpful to help us access our higher wisdom, which helps us integrate and clean up. SQ lets us tap into the fields of intelligence that are normally not available to us. We need to avoid spiritual bypassing. We need to watch that we don't down spiral and regress. We need to clean up as we move up and not just focus on spiritual states and peak experiences that don't last, build skills that last. I think that's the gist of it. We're starting to talk about astrology before we ran out of time. And we also talked about the need to focus on community building skills. We inter-are, to quote Thich Nhat Hanh. That was our group. Anybody left? Group that hasn't spoken?
So in our group, we had Larry D, not Larry S, in it. And Phyllis and I know Jerry was there too, we were in Hungary. We went to a Buddhist retreat that had the largest singing bowl in the world. And it was so big you'd climb in it and lay down in it, and they'd swing this log and hit it. And the primordial resonance that would just go right through your body in the room with everybody in it was extraordinary. And, you know, I call these things psychoactive kind of awakenings, these moments. And it was kind of fun. In the breakout group, Phyllis and I started to develop a resonance of having shared a spiritual experience together in that and doing that. And it's interesting how it persists, even though we're miles away from it. And so a little bit of Fulgum again in kindergarten. And I know you got to develop the skills, but I don't know. The experience always seems to be the path that lights me up so that I want to be able to articulate it and develop more skills in that area.
So we've answered the questions and we've thought about this deeply. And I guess we have 15 minutes left to discuss the meaning of life and the future of humanity. So I open the floor to whatever kind of conversation would like to emerge.
Yeah, I put a question in chat, which maybe we can entertain, because I was noticing that said your skills go from 1 to 5, and similar to integral theory where we put in more colors like the coral at the top, I'm wondering whether there's indications that there's any skills that could get a number 6.
You know, I haven't, and you'd have to help me maybe by seeing the model in more detail to see if you can imagine what would come next. And I'm not saying there wouldn't be a next, you know, it's just at the time I created this, which was between 2000 and 2004, I took it to the highest level I could describe. And I had a little focus group of folks who would look at what I was working on and give me feedback and, you know, tell me, I think you got level 2 really is level 3 and level 3 is really level 2. We need to flip them. Or I don't like how you worded this. I think there's actually more to this. So I did get some feedback from some people who work in the field of spirituality in the workplace, spirituality and leadership, who were in that space of expansive thinking, faith neutral. I haven't found Ken Wilber at the time I was creating this. Interestingly enough, I found him later, but I did have Maslow and Fowler's stages of faith in my mind. And I had those spiritual leaders in my mind. And I was trying to look at the spiritual leaders group as a collective and describe not necessarily any one of them, but the best of them as I could understand it from my understanding of their lifetimes, which is all of that is an imperfect process. So certainly this is all subject to improvement, and humans evolve, you know, 100 years from now, we might look at this as a very primitive set of intelligences.
Yeah, right now I'm not thinking of anything to add, but I feel like there's something by asking the question and keeping our ears open and paying attention that in a way even calls things into being. Because I feel like to handle the challenges we have, or to be the future humans that we're striving for something, but we don't know exactly where we're going. But I feel like by asking the question, it keeps the roof off, and who knows what might be there, because no one's, like it was said, okay, we know something's going to eventually be on coral. So who knows?
Who knows? I'm a big Star Trek fan, so 400 years from now, who knows what kind of cosmic intelligences will come online?
Yeah, to say that there's 5 levels and then we're done, or 5 skill levels.
Yeah,
Feels like
Probably psychosis.
there's just,
yeah.
we don't know what it is, but somebody will eventually it'll be obvious.
Yeah,
So,
you know, when humans were first learning arithmetic, no one could imagine calculus. What can we not imagine today? No.
Yeah, this is what a rich question. And I'm impressed. I didn't realize, Cindy, that you developed this back in, 15, 20, 18 years ago, and that you hadn't weren't even aware of Ken Wilber. It shows we're all on some same track, that your work is so in alignment with the work of Ken Wilber and other theorists. Of course, he was drawing on a lot of the people you did. But to speak to Kathleen's point, Wilber, his recent massive tome, The Religion of Tomorrow, actually goes into these 2nd and 3rd tier stages, and he articulates in very abstract terms what the stages beyond coral. This is coral and spiral dynamics. In Ken Wilber speak, it would be indigo. But there are like 3 stages that he talks about beyond coral, indigo. And he actually says a great deal about them, all extremely abstract. And I've entertained myself by trying to imagine into them, given what we know about their kind of the early, the 1st tier stages, which I see as a lower octave, and that Ken Wilber's 2nd and 3rd tier stages is a higher octave. And I know Terry Fallon's work is very much in parallel with this. But I just, so we can start to imagine into them. And if we do it collectively, we can kind of help course correct each other. And in this, I will say that Nomali Pereira of Integral Life we've just started reading The Religion of Tomorrow together, and it's going to be 16 weeks because there's 16 chapters. We're actually going to be reading the bloody thing and trying to help each other understand it. So this is, Kathleen, this is very much a work in progress, and we are part of the work in progress. And as far as the future human goes, I want to just drop into this quote by Ilya Prigozhin, the physicist, that Jim Rutt of Game A likes to quote. He says, in a system, I'm going to mangle this, in a system that is far from equilibrium, small islands of coherence have the power to shift the entire system. And that's precisely what we're doing here in forums like this, is we are creating small islands of coherence that are like seed crystals in a supersaturated solution. This is, having conversations like this are going to help crystallize the future that we want to see. So this is my cheer for what all of you folks here are doing.
Well said.
Wow, that's beautiful. Thank you. We're seed crystals. I love that image. That's really very, in a super saturated solution. All right, Anna B, tell us what you were going to say.
That the answers that I think we're looking for in the next iteration of your wonderful research and scholarly questioning and inquiry is grounded literally beneath our feet. If you all haven't read the book yet, Finding the Mother Tree, please do, because from my Department of Natural Resources, I just got it in the mail today, my renewal to be a tree inspector, a licensed tree inspector. What we're finding is that all trees and all people and Maslow's transcendence after self-actualization is grounded in that mycelium layer, in the mycorrhizae in the soil, and that as we walk the talk and understand more about our biology, we will understand more about how we are one, and that we can have the transcendence and be equipped with the skills to listen and collaborate and learn and share with all sentient beings. And my ancient cat says hi.
Aw, cool. And my Star Trek nerd wants to point out to you that one of the most recent Star Trek series, Discovery, talks a lot about the mycelial network as the means by which they travel the galaxy. So you may nerd out and love that. Thank you so much, Anna. There's a 9-step process in the book. This is the secret sauce, right? Which is how to shift from your ego self to your higher self. I'm not going to walk you through it, except to say the simple version of it is coming up on, I think, the next slide. The basis of it is to stop, insert a pause, and learn how to shift from ego to higher self. And there's a lot of nuance and strength to some of the specific practices, but you get to this shorthand, which is soul, okay, S-O-U-L. Stop, breathe, and pray, or ask your higher self or God for help, whatever language you like. Observe yourself and get mindful. Get in the present and notice what's going on with your emotions. What is your assumption? What are your interpretations of the event? Understand more deeply what's going on for you. Having compassion for your ego. What is your ego triggered about? Thinking about the other person. Maybe reframing and seeing them with a different story. And there's some longer examples I can give you of this. And for really big challenges, it has taken me sometimes 2 or more years to deeply reframe something that happens. So you can't always do this in the moment, but in the moment you can stop and interrupt your ego and try and find a more loving response. So we do the best we can in the moment. Sometimes we have to insert a pause by taking a walk around the block or saying, I'll get back to you after I have some time to think about it. I can't answer right now. Give yourself the space for your higher self to come in and give the most loving response you can in the moment, with self-forgiveness for your own failings and forgiveness for the failings of others, and just keep at it. Just keep going. The little engine that could. I think I can, I think I can, I think I can. Every day I'll do a little better. There we go. All right. let's see, Marjorie.
Yes, I wanted to share what I don't know if it was shared already. I missed it. What our group was talking about in this last round. And some of what we were saying was in terms of integral theory and the transcend and include part. And you mentioned that what we include needs to be the transformed aspect of each level going up. But I think in reality, we bring with us the ego or the lower self or the less mature self, and we also bring with us the dark side or shadow. So that I think there's an aspect of what the future human might be able to do would be to have room for that ego self, to listen to the voice of the ego, the lesser mature self, and to give it space to allow it to exist and communicate with it, her, she, whatever, so that whatever she needs, whatever has not been transformed yet, can still have space to be listened to and worked on, so that it doesn't get pushed down into the subconscious to where it can run if it's something left in the unconscious. So that was one aspect. And then the other thing we talked about was and the future human might be able to allow that not everyone is going to reach these higher levels, and that everyone starts out at square one. So at any given time, you're going to be in relationship with people at all different levels, and also within ourselves. We have all different levels going on at the same time. So I think, sometimes when we're constantly trying to better ourselves and go up and up and up, that, it's okay to stop at any given point and say, okay, I've developed enough. I'm going to rest here for a while and I'm going to camp out here. And it's okay. I don't have to constantly be bettering myself, because sometimes what happens with someone who's at a higher level, it tends to kind of reference that anything that's below that is lesser than. Mm-hmm. And then you get like a backlash, from resentment, from people who are at lower levels. So those are some of the things that we talked about.
I agree with every single thing you said. Thank you. So, the shadow is a nonstop thing, because even when we think we've cleaned up, there's stuff in there that we don't even know is in there. And life often presents me opportunities to discover new stuff. I get to clean up, hey, guess what? You just found out you got more garbage in there and you get to look at. And every time I look at my own stuff, it hopefully enlarges who I am and enlarges my ability to be compassionate and wise with others, because I'm just as screwed up as everybody else, and everybody's got stuff to work on. And some people have had a lot of support to get through and do their work. And I've benefited from therapy and spiritual teachers that not everybody has had access to. So I liked everything you said. There's a lot to this growing up process that I went through too quickly, and thank you for elaborating. So thank you for that. David, I'm going to jump to you, and then we've got Phyllis, and then we'll have to call it quits for this section. So David and then Phyllis.
I think Prigogine, and I think Anna mentioned him, have actually contributed to the problem, not helped solve it because of chaos and complexity, but that's sort of a different story. I just wanted to mention, I was the one who brought up astrology. Mm-hmm. And if anybody have found any use in that, as far as understanding themselves and the collective. And I had never given it a second thought until 7 months ago. I started looking into it, and I think there's something going on there. Not necessarily for predictive purposes, but certainly to help you live a better life, and also looking at historical. So I just thought I'd bring that up. But I really appreciate, Cindy, what you're doing, because I think this is really important for us as individuals and for the planet, and everybody else who's contributed. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, David.
Okay, and I'm going to jump in here, and this just to respect our time. It is 6 o'clock here, and so what I'd like to do is, first of all, I'd like to thank you, Cindy, for your presentation here. If anybody there, get some appreciation here, and you could go on your screen too under the reactions button if anybody is so inclined. But thank you. Your work is just, really seems important and it's so interesting and it just seems like fascinating application. So thank you so much. I'm looking forward to seeing you and more in depth at ICON.
Thank you, Jerry.
And
Phyllis, I'm sorry we missed you, but email me if you want to send me something.
okay, and we'll continue the discussion here with our informal session in just a few minutes here. I would like to again remind everybody to visit SanDiegoIntegral.org, and there's information there about next upcoming meetings, and also check out our YouTube channel to see a recording of this session in just a couple of days. We appreciate it if you can RSVP to meetings. So if you get on Facebook or Meetup and RSVP that you're coming, we appreciate that. Okay, so thank you, Cindy. And again, if anybody has to jump off, we will see you next time. And from this point forward, we can continue kind of what we were doing before. If you want to raise your hand, that just keeps everybody in order. If you have any comments, questions, general discussion, this is just not any particular formal format here, but just like as if the meeting was over and we're hanging out and having social time afterwards. So I see Phyllis is up. So if you'd like to jump in, we'd love to hear your comment or question.
Yeah, but did we lose Cindy?
Cindy did say she was not going to be able to stay for the social time.
Yeah, well, I guess my thought for the group, I would have loved to be able to ask her. We're always talking about vertical development and obviously there's such, a thrust and an importance to that for, I think, all of us here. But we also talk about the community being small and Ken Wilber talks about span and, so he talks about horizontal development also. And the idea of really increasing the span of people who are involved at each stage and at each level. And I'm just wondering if there's any work being done on broadening the community that has this sort of developmental idea available to them. Is it in education? Is it a part of, any kind of, educational program? Because it is rather skill-based, the same way that growth mindset is skill-based and is something that's taught. Not to discount the experience one bit, but still there are things that to broaden, I think, would be an important thing to start looking at.
All right. Hello, everyone. Good to be with you again. I really appreciated this opportunity. And yeah, so as I reflect on the breakouts that we've done before and what arises for me as a theme, kind of contributing, feeding forward to the Future Human Conference. Thank you, Tom, for all that you're doing and you're organizing to pull that together. It's a monumental thing, I know. What you'd said, Tom, about the experiential, mentioning that singing bowl in Hungary, for instance. One of the things that I reflect on is that integral theory is so vast and complex that it's easy to get in this divergent mode. And to the extent that we're doing that, it makes it harder, I think, to connect sometimes. And that how do we also bring in that convergent energy where there are exercises, practices, things that are experiential that allow people to, get more into that we space together and that, what emerges out of there. Because I have a sense that to the extent that things are more fragmented and people are, thinking here and thinking there and all the rest, it's hard to get that small island of coherence that's going to allow something really juicy to emerge. And so to continue to look for what are those shared practices that we can bring, because there's such a, big body of practice too, not only integral theory, but, intellectual life practice, and how does that inform our sensibilities so that we can practice the attunement here? Like I noticed, some of the things, Shara, when you said something earlier, and I feel the group, shifting its energy, and Larry, what you were bringing too, that, we can start attuning more that way. And I think there's something, mysterious that can emerge in that I'd like to see, consciously attending to and giving space for that.
Go ahead, Keith, in Hungary.
I just put a thumbs up to what Eric shared, because I totally agree. We need to generate that kind of we space. Appreciated being in the breakout with you, Eric. So yeah.
Some of the things that Eric brought up about ICON is we're hoping it involves ICON's Integral Conference of North America, and we're hoping it evolves into Integral Congress of North America. So for it to be a clearinghouse of how to do integral events, because there is no national organization. There's no international organization. It is fragmented all over the place. And I wonder about these things because in the fragmentation, being the negative part of it, is the ground, the fertile ground that all these different tributaries are developing. And, whatever it became as an organizing force, I wouldn't want it to evolve to the level of dogma where we can't hold that really complex mystery, the not knowing. So, but we could use a little bit more orange organization, I think.
Yes, I'm wondering now how, I know this is part of Tom's and others' aspiration for the future human conference, is to allow space for the specific types of coherence that Eric was just speaking about. So, and it includes an embodied presence, which was one of the subjects of the first of our 2 breakout groups. We spoke at that. So Eric, I'm curious now how many people here are going to be going to the conference. Yeah. So maybe we can be thinking about how we can embody what Eric just spoke of, ways to cohere the presence. So not just in our heads, but in our hearts and our haras and our spirits.
Yeah, as I hear you say that, Karen, I notice the vulnerability in doing that kind of move. I could feel that in myself, and just to name something in my own process in case it would resonate. But there's a way, having been in integral communities for a long time, that I can attach myself to ideas as sort of a mask, that it gives me some, some way of entering a community, and it can address a social insecurity too, and to let go of all my ideas about things and to be in a more raw, vulnerable kind of place. It's a practice. I mean, going to what Cindy was saying tonight as a skill to practice. I mean, it's like getting some track time for me, like how do I do that right now? How do I look at everybody's faces? How do I feel? And, if I see someone who I don't think is resonating, do I pull back, or can I just continue to bring myself here? And it's like, okay, this is me showing up right now. And to the extent that I do that, I feel you differently as I look around the room, and as I see you, Larry, and I feel like I'm meeting your eyes. And Ariana, Jerry, Tom. Yeah.
As you're saying that, Eric, one thing that was kind of coming up for me is just like my experience with, I don't know how familiar you are with Theory U leadership or with Theory U, but those practices are ones that have really helped me to touch into like this. There's like a connectedness that comes up within us prior to language that seems to have a lot more insight than my thinking brain has. And so like those practices are really helpful to me, where we kind of like and I guess like one aspect of it would be that we people, like, in order for that to happen, we have to slow down. We have to slow, just slow way down, become embodied, like breathe and do what you just did, connect with each other, and then look for something aside from thoughts that arise, like look for images, look for metaphors, look for, you know, something that shows up. And often that has an insight into what wants to happen here. Like, what is it that's arising in the field? And so I think those practices are there, they're available. And of course, Theory U isn't the only place that uses that type of practice, but it's very well organized in that. Like, it's a very well structured process. But what I find is, I think in a lot of groups, we just don't we're not willing to take the time. It seems, we rush through, and there's a lot of thinking and a lot of analysis and that type of thing, which is not particularly generative. So, it's like a repeating. I think even Otto Scharmer, the theory, he says it's downloading. It's like, I'm going to tell you what I've known for. I'm going to tell you what I've known for the last 20 years. And it's just not generative. It's not something new in this moment that's arising for me. So I think those practices are available, and I just, I love falling into that space, and programs like the GTC program, Ariana and I were in that, move into those spaces, and it's just super. It's really powerful. Yeah.
That's what we talked about in our breakout. The liminal spaces.
Since we've been talking about spirituality and a lot of other really important and fascinating subjects, I thought I'd bring up T.S. Eliot, the poet, in case people or anybody on this call does not really know his work, because in 2022, there was an article saying T.S. Eliot foresaw all this coming 100 years ago, which was the publication of The Wasteland. And then last year, somebody, I think in the Atlantic, said basically the same thing. T.S. Eliot had us pegged. Now, the only reason I'm bringing him up is because I think he had spiritual tools for development, and I totally disagree with the current thinking about his work, which was, the current thinking is he went from despair to faith, and I think that's totally incorrect. And one of my missions is to expose people to my interpretation, I suppose, but have people go read the material for themselves, because in our society, there's a decline of the humanities as well as other things. Somebody mentioned universal language. I mean, music to me, math is universal. There's all these humor. Anyway, but I just wanted to recommend T.S. Eliot, and I would start, if nobody's looked at this seriously, I would start with The Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock, which took him 2 years to write, right after he graduated from Harvard and then went to England. And he's from St. Louis. He's not from the UK. So anyway, it's my 3 cheers for T.S. Eliot.
Let us go then, you and I, while the evening is spread out against the sky like a patient etherized upon a table. Oh, I'm with you, David. I don't know what people say about him, but he's up there with Maulana Rumi and Rilke. He defines the problem. I will show you fear in a handful of dust, but then he has he goes into transcendence. And I think a lot of the critics who wrote about him in the last century just couldn't, all they could see was a return back to traditional religion. But T.S. Eliot is a transcendental poet in a lot of his stuff. With you on that.
Yeah, my favorite quote from him is something about, after all the seeking and searching, we arrive back to the place where we started and know it for the first time.
Yes, we shall not cease from exploration, and the end of all our exploring will to the return where we started and know the place for the first time. That's the eros and agape. That's the outflow into manifestation and the return. Yes. He was there.
It almost sounds like his critics had no developmental awareness. Because when he returns back to the spirituality, they mislabel as traditionalism. Is that possible?
Oh, I agree. They had no clue. There's one critic in the 60s or 70s who analyzed not the quartets. It wasn't the one of his other Ash Wednesday, and said it was about sexual repression. WTF?
Well, I think you could read a lot. I mean, The Wasteland in and of itself is probably the most discussed poem in the English language. But as far as his reputation it's gone up and down. People could very easily say that he became he was revolutionary and he became traditional and he became ossified. But I just wanted to mention about in my view, Prufrock is exploratory, but he's actually got answers. I don't think he's just asking questions.
I agree.
I think that one early reviewer of Prufrock said the guy who wrote this thing is borderline insane. Okay, I mean, that's what he wrote. And later, T.S. Eliot won the Nobel Prize in Literature. And he was a bank clerk. One little quick aside, after he won the Nobel, they visited the bank and said, hey, what did you think of this guy who just won the Nobel Prize in Literature? And this guy said, 'tis a pity he left the bank. He could have been a branch manager. So anyway, that's your little T.S. Eliot story.
David, it sounds like you got a future presentation. T.S. Eliot from an integral perspective.
Yeah, I've already presented on him multiple hours, but I'm trying to get my act together to do something somewhat succinct.
So something I'm sitting in right now, this is the echo of Eric. I feel you, Eric. I hear you. And it's presence, immediacy, here and now, not being out in our thoughts and our concepts, and be it integral concepts or concepts about mysticism or whatever, but being here, present with one another in the moment, letting go of mind stuff, call it moving into the heart or moving into our spirit, that which pre-exists words and language. And just sitting with the challenge of that. And I'll speak to that challenge about myself. My mind keeps wanting to come in as I keep letting go and just be here. And if we're all just being here, not saying anything, there's that part of me in my practicality. The mind comes in with, what are we doing? And just being here. What are we even being? And just being here. Is just being here enough? Without words, without ideas, without mental constructs. And can we only take it in little bites? Just little moments. Before the mind wants to come in again and start conceptualizing. At least start wondering, what are we doing? What are we being in our being together right now?
Larry, I hear that, and putting together what you and Eric were saying, it reminded me of what I discovered when I was in the Evolutionary Collective with Patricia Albert a couple years ago, that when we're in the room sometimes and somebody's speaking, using the we practice of like feeling like sending energy to that whoever's speaking to their heart. And I don't, it could be my imagination, but whether I'm listening to a lecture, when I do remember it, that I hear a difference in the person's voice. Like they're more there. They've got more boost, more energy. And it's like what you're saying is sort of existential, but I feel like it's a question that we as people that are in the room, if we are like really practicing resonance, like a way of doing that would be to find the heart or the being of the person that's talking. And we may be able to reach and then sort of amplify and feel and sense what they're doing. And I think that may be how, I'm curious about whether that's a way that if audiences would feel that way about being in a room where somebody's speaking, I'm just really curious what would happen. We could try it as an experiment. And then I was also feeling the other day at a church service, and I wasn't saying anything going wrong. I was just, the way I was hearing it, that, you know, like a comedian will sometimes say during a comedy show, "Oh, you're a great audience." But I feel like what they're saying is, "You've laughed, this is fun, you're paying attention to me." And I something shifted in my brain, and I sort of heard it like, well, if the people that are paying attention to somebody that's speaking is, or a performer, like a cello player, if we're really like energetically supporting the player and the cello player is hearing it, we could really be that like unified in what's happening in the room. And who knows what that cello player could end up sounding like, because they're getting that support. And what happened is that like the cello player was excellent, and everybody stood up and gave them a standing ovation. But I said, that's actually could be like oh, we're recognizing this as one way. What if it's two ways? Maybe we wouldn't clap. Maybe we would just stop and then just put our hands up to each other and just say, wow, what happened? I don't know the cultural shift that would happen to be that, but I just had this question and see like a possibility.
I like that.
Yeah, I'm so inspired, Kathy. And you know what occurs to me is like, what's the founding principle that underlies how we show up? And what if that has within it like an input that leads to an output of a type of separation? So maybe it's the infrastructure of even how we do community that might need to be the experiment. Like, what if instead of presentations, we had dialogues? So the presenter couldn't be polished, and the unknown would be part of the seed of the presentation. And we could have the group constructed, not like me constructed, but like what I'm hearing you say, Kathy, is almost like a heart agreement that we're going to have your back no matter how inartful your delivery is, in this impromptu way of showing up with knowledge, with skill, with cultivated, understanding of something, but not so much as a presentation. And then maybe like the breakout groups, the questions emerge from the group, you know, like what's alive, you know. So I'm just feeling into the relationship between infrastructure and expression.
Yeah, and the infrastructure, when there's a small group, like we've got 13 people here, but I feel like in any group, whether it's 4 or 8, like a small discussion group, of creating the culture where people can say things that are just emerging that they didn't know they were going to say. And but I one thing that's coming up, like as I've been thinking about this, like what's been emerging is partly sort of realizing what's going on. Like I had a question, like, because we all want to be heard and we each have a question, and then like Eric suggested, how do we stop and pause and take this slow and be, however it was that Eric put it. And I felt like maybe there's something orange to it. And I felt like a question came up that I don't have an answer to, of what if we mapped this a little bit and then saw and then said, okay, what do we need here, so that we would be content, so that we would say, all right, we realize where we are. People have questions. We want to know, we want to say, but then also bringing in the value of what like several of us are pointing to, of like a signal that even says on the this group's Facebook page, meetup page, that we stop and pause and allow some coherence of, so that we actually do that.
I had a thought to share. My job sounds, in light of this conversation, to be a sort of a little sandbox version of what we're talking about. Most of the work that I do is entertaining at senior communities. So I go to places, and I'm a piano bar entertainer by trade. I was doing that in Chicago for 20 years, and I moved out to Denver, and I do mostly work with senior communities, although I do stuff with baby boomers as well. But what happens is I've got this repertoire of, say, 500 songs. I start throwing these things out. People start singing along. They start interacting. All of a sudden, somebody thinks of a song that's from their space, that it triggers this, and they go, hey, how about this one? And that might be a different genre, for example, than what we were doing, but that traffics the attention into another area. And then, say, it goes to show tunes, it goes to country music, it goes to old standards. And there is this collective interactivity that happens in a group very similar to, in number at least, to what we're doing here. And so it occurs to me that it's possible that we could glean from sources like this what the dynamics of what you guys are talking about could look like, and some of the parameters that might happen. And that's all I have to say about that, said Forrest.
Yeah, I mean, we're an evolutionary organization. So what does the evolutionary monthly gathering, online gathering, look like?
Definitely more like jazz than Mozart.
Now what's coming up in me was, I forget it was last month or the month before, when we referenced Salman Rushdie's book that got him a death sentence from the conservative Islamic community, Satanic Verses. And the trigger for the community was the inference that some of the verses in the Quran may have been dictated by the devil instead of by Allah. But the real underlying threat was his foundational question: how does newness enter the world? Which is, how do we evolve? How do new things? And these kind of spaces, these kind of collective presencing and open spaces And Shara, as you were saying, and Eric and others, this is how newness is able to enter the world. I mean, we need our rational discursive intellects. I mean, what we have done with them, we need them. We transcend and include them. But as we have built these scaffolds of thought, these magnificent cathedrals of thought, we leave room for the windows that let the light in, the spaces that allow newness to enter. And this is how evolution happens through us. This is beautiful. I'm so pleased to be here with you folks.
Yeah. I might be speaking way too often or something like that, but I had a conversation with somebody Tuesday night after a meeting that ended at like 9 o'clock. I went to an election night meeting. I had a conversation with somebody that he had been canvassing around Huntington Beach and said there was a lot of very conservative. There's a lot of houses of like 4-bedroom houses with one person in each house that's very afraid because they could rent to somebody, but they don't want to because they're afraid of who could rent that house. And I feel like, yeah, this is emergence. And I'm thinking of so many things that are emergent or could be much bigger in our society, but then there's so much fear that is also like it's just out there and people are immersing in it, watching in it, and sure that it's just a practical response. So I'm just don't have a solution other than finding ways for, just really the need for the coherence and feeling of oneness as our story. And it's just a condition.
Yes.
That you and I can't one by one fix it, but
yes, this brings up the need for safe containers. So we need the structure to create a safe container. This community, it's safer. We feel safe enough to open ourselves, like Eric said, and be very vulnerable because we are being very vulnerable to do what we're doing here. But we know each other in there, and there's a structure. These monthly meetings have a certain structure. And one of my hopes for ICON, which is going to become kind of a matrix and meeting ground ongoing into the future where people like us and other groups can meet and cross-fertilize, is to create safe containers to explore new ideas, to explore new psychoactive techniques carefully, and to have very difficult discussions about issues that trigger people. And we do need some structure. And that's one of those yin-yang things. We don't want so much structure that we rigidify and just keep repeating what we already know. But in order to allow newness to enter the world and not be crushed at birth, there needs to be a safe container for it. So this is one of my aspirations for ICON is that as it grows and flourishes, I mean, we need to get this going first, but that it can become a container where we can create little like incubators for specific conversations, specific projects, places to have experiments and so on, and where we learn, we'll have to learn by doing. But how can we create the appropriate containers for what we want to allow for newness to enter the world in some of them, so that when this new idea is a stillborn, it can be received and cared for until it's strong enough to stand on its own. So Kathy, it's a really important point you brought up. We need both. It's a both end. We need some structure so that we can be safe doing what we want to do. Thank you.
I would add about safety. I think we all want some degree of that. That's not too arguable. We all want some sense of safety, but I would argue that safety is perceived. It's not absolute. It's not real in an absolute sense. An example might be, I feel safe in my condo. I'm protected from the world. All of a sudden, my unit blows up because the guy downstairs was making drugs and it blew up on him. I wasn't safe. I thought I was safe.
Mm-hmm.
1,000 of examples that could be used to demonstrate that, I drive 65 miles an hour. That's safe on the freeway. And boom, somebody hits me. Was I safe? Or I drive 80 miles an hour, which is common for me in the freeway, and I hit nobody, nobody hits me. Am I safe? I thinking in my younger days when I was heavy into dating and pursuing women, and that feeling I got, men can relate to this, generally speaking, that I wouldn't call it fear, wouldn't call it anxiety. There's a nervousness of sorts. It's like a positive nervousness right before you approach the woman. Am I safe? Am I not safe? You know, it's all perceived. So we can structure the heck out of any container. Doesn't mean we're safe. It's more higher perceived safety, which is a good thing because it helps us feel like we want to open up. But my point is, know that there's always that possibility that you're not really safe. You just perceived you are, and just live with that as we express. Like, I don't feel 100% safe in this group.
Yeah, and some of it's like our perception, like my neighborhood.
That's what I'm saying.
I'll walk my dogs at 10 o'clock midnight, and it's a safe neighborhood, but nobody else is doing it because they think they're not going to be safe, but it is.
And it is.
Yeah.
It's perceived. Yeah.
Right. And they're perceiving it, so it's limiting them. So I think like doing something that actually is safe and getting, being right in our more accurate in our perception about what's safe.
And you're not, Kathy, not even 100% safe. You feel safe in your neighborhood until something happens.
Right.
Then wait a minute, maybe I wasn't safe. So it's perceived. That's not good or bad.
Right.
It's just acknowledging that we're never 100% safe. We just have to carry that with us, like the old saying or new saying, whatever it is, about bravery. Bravery doesn't mean you're acting because you feel not afraid. It means being afraid and acting anyhow. That's kind of the same thing with safety. Well, you're not 100% safe, and that's not good or bad. It just is. Did Jesus feel safe? Anybody should have felt pretty safe being the Son of God or the one with the Father or whatever. Probably should have felt pretty safe in the world. And given what happened to him, I think on some level he did feel safe because he knew he could overcome death. He knew he was going to go through a bad time with torture and crucifixion and all that stuff, but that doesn't mean he didn't feel safe. And as we look at him from lesser stages of consciousness development, we could easily say, gee, he wasn't safe at all. I mean, his own people turned on him.
And he did it anyway. I want to recognize Elson, who's got her.
Yeah, just jump in, Elson.
Hey, everyone. I feel like I consider myself a neophyte when it comes to integral theory, so I apologize if some of the things that I share is kind of, I don't know, immature. So I was thinking this, as you mentioned, I forgot who was speaking, but safety, and I wanted to tie it back around to, what that future human would look like. And again, I agree as well. I feel like it has to do with perception. And I think part of what that future human is going to have to be is not that so much that we're looking for a safe space and looking safety in other people, but becoming the safe person within themselves. Like you become the safety before you can even offer that to anyone else, or before you're able to see it for yourself.
You might not be able to see it where it's dark, but there's a couple people with heart icons on their Brady Bunch screens.
Oh. I'm not sure if you guys can see me either. I don't really have great reception at my house, and I don't have Wi-Fi at my house either, so I'm just walking the streets trying to get the best reception.
We hear you fine.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Alison. Whew. Wave of tenderness. Hmm. So the safety thing, and this is a both and response to what you were saying, Karen and Larry and Nelson, that certainly there's a need for looking at how we create structures that are safe to people to be in, that needs to be created. And I just want to bring in another aspect. It's again an and here of for my own practice, how do I experience a need for safety, and where can I surrender that need and just simply be vulnerable, whether I perceive a container to be, quote unquote, safe or not. I mean, there's a, relativeness to the context, as you're saying, Larry. I mean, I'm aware of, like as I'm in this space, I feel pretty safe here generally because I've been in this group, quite a while, but I'm aware that things can be posted on YouTube that somebody might, take out a little excerpt or something like that. And so, there's that side of it, but I feel like on a deeper level too, when I'm feeling more connected to the whole, the question of safety doesn't really arise in the same way. To the extent that I'm in a certain level of consciousness, then safety gets to be a really big concern. And boy, there's a lot of things that I'm afraid of in life, so afraid of this, afraid of that, and especially in political spaces and all that these days. And I also have access in fleeting moments, if I practice, to a space that's beyond that, where safety isn't really arising as a concern, and that to consciously try to inhabit that space and bring that sensibility without respect to any objective safety in the group. Maybe somebody takes something I say and twist it, but I don't care. And I wish I could quote it from the Tao Te Ching. There's, something, and I would butcher it too much to say it now, but it's like of the, the master who, trusts people whether or not they're trustworthy. That sense of trust is something that she feels towards the Tao. And whether people are externally trustworthy or not is beside the point from the level of consciousness that she's inhabiting. So I just want to kind of weave that into what we're exploring here as well.
For our listeners, the meeting unexpectedly ended at this point, so thanks for being here and hope to see you next time. For further information, including upcoming events, resources, links to our Facebook and Meetup pages, and our fabulous donate button, please visit our website at sandiegointegral.org. Donations are greatly appreciated and help us to continue to provide information and connection within the Integral community.